Are you what you would call paper wealthy? Have a huge balance sitting in your retirement account, but sweating over the size of your emergency fund? Join me in our Red Zone discussion today to find out why you probably won't actually realize those paper gains when you need them in retirement. So, this is not some doom and gloom clickbait video where I tell you that the sky is falling and the market is about to crash. It might be, it might not be, and even broken clocks are right twice a day. This is actually a first world problem type of story, but this first world problem might prevent you from living the life you likely want to once you stop the grind of working. It may even keep you grinding longer, even when you don't really need to. Before we dive into it, for those who are new to the channel, I entered the red zone in 2024 when I had accumulated enough assets where retirement was no longer theoretical, but was a real possibility. That's when I began to think more deliberately about my previously passive investing approach and to make adjustments to my portfolio. If you like this type of content, make sure you hit subscribe so you can continue to get it on the channel. So here's the problem. Most people's strategy to prepare for retirement is to spend some period of time, usually several decades, accumulating assets that appreciate in price. Once they've hit their quote unquote number, they quit working and they expect to be able to flip a switch to accumulate in reverse, or in other words, decumulate, which involves selling those assets to give themselves a paycheck. Sounds reasonable. So, what's the problem? What got you to accumulation is exactly what prevents you from decumulation. According to Michael Kitces, the head of planning strategy at Focus Partners Wealth, in theory, a retirement portfolio is meant to be spent. In practice, most retirees faced with an ever open-ended potential of living many more years will feel compelled to keep extra assets available. In other words, retirees hesitate to sell, or if they do sell, to convert to something maybe a little more conservative. This, coupled with the 4% rule, which I'll talk a little bit later on, results in over 2/3 of thousands of scenarios, retirees actually doubling their investment portfolio paper value over a 30-year retirement, when in theory, they would spend it down close to zero or whatever their final legacy goal might be. There is simply a mismatch between theoretical decumulation and the reality of actual retirement spending. Or this survey that concluded that retirees are more afraid of running out of money than death. So basically, at any funeral, most retired people would rather be in the coffin than having to foot the bill for the funeral. This loss aversion can be helpful at times, but overly focusing here will cause you to not get the maximum or even good utility out of your dollars. It will prevent you from decumulating. Or this study that points out that median wealth retirees have a consumption gap, basically the difference between what they can spend and what they actually spend, of approximately 8%. And then as wealth increases, the consumption gap can grow to as high as 53%. Or this study that notes that more than half of spending for traditional retirees, those and the traditional retirees here are defined with those kind of with pensions, comes from guaranteed sources of income, while new retirees only have about 20% of their spending accounted for from those same guaranteed sources, which bridges us to this survey around retirement satisfaction, which indicates that those with guaranteed sources of income are more satisfied and, as mentioned earlier, spend more than those without it. Decumulation is simply unnatural to human psychology. You don't have to turn into a hoarder, but your loss experience over your life has likely taught you some valuable lessons along the way. Losses just tend to stick with us and can be more meaningful than some of our victories. So I'm suggesting that rather than trying to ignore our loss aversion and the numerous studies and articles that point to retiree underspending, that once we enter the red zone, we might want to both leverage our life lessons and our innate aversion to loss, which, by the way, happens to be kicking into high gear at exactly the right time, in my opinion. That right time is the 5 to 10 years prior to retirement, when a poor sequence of returns may not give your portfolio time to recover before you need to start decumulation. After all, what are our accumulated assets for? They're to be used as tools to increase our satisfaction. Or will we look at them as just another increase of stress that we were hoping to get away from in the workplace when we retired? If you can't decumulate, what was all of your saving for? So, one approach that I'm not really advocating here for is potentially to try to change your mindset. To me, that seems pretty hard. Look at the overwhelming evidence of nearly anything against a conviction or belief. Belief wins. So I'm considering whether we change our strategy and end up meeting our goals without having to overly wrestle against our own mindset. The psychology of decumulation, I think, is a primary reason that most people in the end up hiring financial advisors because they simply can't bring themselves to sell or sell as much as they could because it feels like losing some of what they've worked so hard to accumulate. So in turn, they'll hire someone else, a financial advisor, to put someone between them and the emotion of this and to do it for them. Some other problems with this decumulation strategy is that it requires a massive amount of assets that you may need depending on your spending level. Because of price fluctuations, bear markets, market corrections, the safest withdrawal rate for a 30-year period historically has been generalized as the 4% rule, in which a traditional portfolio 60-40 of stocks and bonds has you selling 4% of that portfolio every year to generate income as a safe withdrawal rate, meaning you will not run out of money in retirement. Even more exotic withdrawal tactics, however, exist, such as guardrails. They also involve you selling your assets, and the point of them is to allow you to spend a few more additional percentage points above 4% in good years. Or if you get really unlucky, for example, retiring in the late 1960s, then you have to spend much less in bad years. These attempts at optimization are over-optimizing in my opinion. They increase complexity unnecessarily when it comes to guardrails, and they remain unexecutable without professional help because they tend to ignore basic human nature. In my opinion, they are solutions to problems of an inappropriate strategy rather than having a realistic strategy and portfolio to support that strategy entering the red zone and into retirement. It's simply not all about the numbers. Finally, a strategy of decumulation simply equaling accumulation in reverse provides in and of itself no insulation from sequence of returns risk. To compensate for that risk, again, our withdrawal tactics either need to be overly conservative, 4%, or we need a complicated guardrail strategy that will cause some of even the best spreadsheet warriors to give up and pay someone a full percentage point of the proceeds from the sale of their assets just to unlock dollars from their investments. So what else could we do? Are there other options? I've decided for me personally that the famous maxim of what got you here may not get you there rings true when it comes to generating income in retirement, and the final approach into the red zone is the time to begin that transition. In light of that conviction, I need to transition my overall investment portfolio as I enter into the red zone to one that, first focuses on both growth and income versus my accumulation portfolio, which was primarily focused on just growth. It also needs to focus on creating guaranteed or semi-guaranteed floors of income versus solely relying on price appreciation. It needs to focus more on reducing losses at this point than maximizing gains, especially due to the increased sensitivity to sequence of return risk while we're in the red zone. And finally, I need a portfolio that aligns with both general human nature and my personal risk tolerance rather than aligning with the interests of the financial industry. All of these papers or other surveys that I cited at the beginning of this video, the financial industry knows those as well, and frankly, they wrote most of them. They know that you will undersell your assets and will gladly continue to collect fees from you while not paying you anything unless you decide to sell. So, how exactly do we structure a portfolio that is more aligned to our basic makeup and then personalized to us? Join me as I go throughout this journey in the next episodes where we dive into some portfolio construction options that might just do the trick. Along the way, we'll review my own portfolio, my own strategy, how I'm transitioning so that you can see how a do-it-yourselfer, rather than a financial professional, is approaching the problem in real time. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time right here in the Red Zone.